Welcome back, guys. This is Commodore Urban, and if you're tuning in, then you know what we're going to be doing. We're going to be continuing with part 3 of my reading of the book Grandfather, Ship The S.S. United States by E.B. Fletcher. So let's go ahead and dive right back into it, and we are on chapter 6. Alright. Chapter 6. John was up bright and early on Saturday morning, eating his favorite cereal, Captain Crunch, and watching reruns of Bugs Bunny cartoon. He had dressed himself and had done a fairly good job, except that he still got confused sometimes about which feet his shoes went in. He didn't think that was so bad. At least, he said to himself, I know how to tie 'em. John put his breakfast dishes in the sink, as Mama had always instructed, went upstairs and knocked softly on Grandfather and Grandma's door. At first there was no response, but then John heard his grandparents stirring. Grandma said, "Come in." John opened the door very quietly so as to not disturb his parents, and tiptoed into the bedroom. Grandfather and Grandma Liz were in bed talking quietly. Grandfather hauled John up in the bed and nestled him between his grandparents. Grandfather said, "Sport, it's only 7:30. What are you doing dressed?" John replied, "I'm ready to go see the ship, Grandfather. I'm excited. I watched my tunes and had some cereal. Now I'm ready." Grandma Liz smiled and said, "I think I'll go take a nice hot shower and leave you two to talk." John looked at Grandfather and said, "What do you want to talk about, Grandfather?" Grandfather sat up in bed, stared ahead for a moment, and then looked at his grandson. "John," he said, "you like that ship, the one you call the Lonely Ship?" "Uh-huh," nodding his head. "Yeah, I like her too," said Grandfather. John looked questioningly at his grandfather and said, "Her? How come you call the ship her?" "Well," said Grandfather, "a long time ago, before ladies like your mama or grandma were able to go to sea, men missed 'em so they named their ships after 'em." "I never knew that. So the Lonely Ship is a lady's ship. And that's why I heard that lady's voice when I went to see her last Saturday. It was the Lonely Ship who talked to me." Grandfather looked at John and said, "John, boy, what are you talking about?" John said, "The Lonely Ship, Grandfather. She talked to me last Saturday. I told you I heard something in the wind." "What did she say?" John said, "I'm not sure. Mama said that I needed to listen better so I'd know what she said. I guess I didn't listen too good. The Lonely Ship is an old lady's ship, isn't she?" Grandfather looked down at him and said, "That's right. She's pretty old as far as ships go." John thought for a moment and said, "You're old too, Grandfather, aren't you?" Grandfather grinned at John. "Some days I feel older than I really am." John continued, "Are you older than the ship?" "Yes, indeed. I'm older than she is." John thought for a moment and said, "Say, I don't even know the ship lady's name." Grandfather smiled and said, "John, every ship has a name. The ship's name is usually written on the bow and stern. The Lonely Ship's name is United States." John's mouth and eyes were wide open. "Grandfather, you know her name?" Grandfather settled back against his pillows and put his arm around him. "John, I was the captain of the Lonely Ship." John was speechless. Grandfather continued, "I took command of that ship in 1964, and I was with her right until the time that she was laid up. She was for many years in Norfolk, and then briefly at Newport News. And after being towed to Turkey and the Ukraine, she came to stay here in Philadelphia. I sailed many voyages on that ship, and well, it is very upsetting to see her looking the way she does now. You should have seen her when she was new. What a beauty she was. She was a very clean ship. In all her years at sea, she never had a breakdown. You could stand on the stern and see her wake for miles. She won the Hales Trophy for the fastest transatlantic crossing. You know, she was built at the Newport News shipbuilding near where your grandmother and I live." Grandfather was quiet for a bit, and John was trying to take in all the information he had just heard. "This is awesome, Grandfather. Why didn't you tell me this stuff before?" Grandfather looked at his tiny grandson and said, "I wasn't sure you understand, but now I do. But now I know that you do." John looked at his grandfather and said, "Mama says that we love people, not things, but I do love that ship even though it's not a person." Grandfather hesitated for a moment and said, "How would you like to go on the lonely ship for a tour?" John's eyes became wide and he threw his arms around Grandfather's neck and said, "Oh boy, Grandfather, would I? You're the best grandfather in the whole world. Wait till I tell my friends Mark and George about this." John squeezed Grandfather's neck and said, "Do you still have the keys that drive the ship?" Grandfather laughed and said, "No, John, but I'm afraid not. But I do know the man who owns her, and I've given him a call and he's made the arrangements so that we may go on board her." John thought for a moment. "Gosh, Grandfather, the United States is sure going to be happy to see you again." Grandfather sat quietly, wondering if he was going to be as glad to see her. And here's chapter 7, but here's the illustration here. Chapter 7. "Oh no," exclaimed Grandfather. "Look at what they've done to her. This is worse than I had imagined. Liz, look at this." John was still trying to adjust to the lack of light now that they were inside the ship. He looked back at the long ladder that he, Grandfather, Grandma Liz, and several other people he didn't know had just climbed up to get into the ship. "The bulkheads are gone," said Grandfather. "What are bulkheads?" asked John. "Walls," responded Grandfather. "They were removed several years ago to get rid of the asbestos in them." John asked, "What's cestus?" Grandfather, with hands on hips, looked around and said, "Asbestos, John. It's a substance that was used to make the ship fire resistant, but it was found to cause cancer in people, so it was removed from the ship." "Oh," said John. Grandma Liz stood next to Grandfather, shaking her head at the sight before them. Grandfather began to get his bearings, bulkheads or not, and proceeded to give a guided tour through the ship, showing John and others where things used to be. Eventually, the tour made its way to the bridge. Grandfather stood in the wheelhouse, the place from which he commanded his sailors and navigated through the mighty Atlantic. As he spoke of his years at sea, his voice never cracked, but tears brimmed in his eyes to see his once grand lady in such a feeble state. Grandma Liz held his hand, never saying a word. Grandfather showed John where the captain's chair, the engine telegraph, the radar equipment used to be. The wheelhouse had been completely stripped. As Grandfather spoke to the others and answered their questions, John walked onto the bridge wing. He looked up into the overcast sky and watched the seagulls dance in the air above him. The wind began to pick up as John stood quietly. He was actually standing on the lonely ship. He was here, and since he hadn't known what the ship looked like in her heyday, he was not disappointed in her appearance now. "I think you're still beautiful. You'll always be beautiful to me, United States." The wind began to blow more again. John heard a lady's voice speak to him. This time it was not as faint. He stood and listened as his mama had told him. "You came, John. You came to see me, and you brought my Commodore. Thank you, John. Thank you." John stood wide-eyed. He knew he heard her, really heard her. She was real. She had real thoughts, real feelings, and perhaps even real emotions. "John, are you ready to go down to the engine room now? I'll show you the best engines ever put into a luxury liner," said Grandfather. "Yeah, Grandfather, I'm ready." Grandma Liz took John's hand and guided him through the dark shadows of the once proud liner. In the engine room, John saw gauges, nozzles, hoses, and even a fire extinguisher. This part of the ship looked normal, as if at any time the crew would announce that she was underway. One of the men on the tour asked, "Did you ever know how fast the Big U could really go?" Grandfather replied, "Her speed was top secret. However, we never fully opened up the boilers to capacity to see just exactly what she could do. So the answer to your question is no. Best estimate is around 40 knots. John tugged on Grandfather's coat. Grandfather, did he say Big U? Grandfather smiled. That's the ship's nickname. John grinned, realizing now who the mystery lady in Grandfather's life really was. He continued to pull on Grandfather's coat and ask questions as they toured the ship. Grandfather was very patient and responded to all of John's inquiries. After the tour was complete and everyone was dockside, John looked up at the enormous black hull in front of him. He said softly, I hope you can dream about being at sea the way it used to be. Maybe that will help you not to be so sad and lonely. As John followed Grandfather and Grandma to the car, he looked back at the ship and he heard her faintly say, My dreams of years gone by are all that I have now. You've given me another memory. Today's visit. Thank you, little one. As John stopped in his tracks and said out loud, You're welcome. Grandma and Grandfather both stopped walking, turned around. Grandfather said, Who are you talking to? John said, The ship, of course. She thanked me for coming to see her and bringing you. Grandfather and Grandma looked around questioning at each other while John came skipping up to his grandparents and took them both by the hand. That night at supper, John told his parents every bit of his adventures on the ship that day. Mama had ordered pizza, so they sat around the toasty fire in the fireplace and ate. Later, while Mama and Daddy tucked John in and listened to his prayers, John said, Mama, I left out one part of the trip today. What part is that, sweetie? Asked Mama. You know how you told me to listen better next time the ship talked to me? Uh-huh, said Mama, kneeling by her son's bed. Well, she talked to me today, and I listened real good. What did she say? Asked Mama. She thanked me for coming to see her and bringing Grandfather. Oh. Mama looked amused. Did you thank your grandparents for taking you today? Asked Daddy. Oh, yeah, said John. I had real good manners, like you told me. Good boy, said Daddy, ruffling John's hair. John, asked Mama, did Grandfather get raindrops in his eyes today? Yeah, answered John, when we went to the wheelhouse. Said Mama, looking up at Daddy with concern. We better get you to sleep. John yawned wildly. I love you, sweetie. Pleasant dreams. Daddy went to his study to work for a while, but Mama tiptoed down the hall and knocked on Grandfather and Grandma Liz's door. Come in, said Grandma. Mama came in and saw that Grandfather and Grandma were in their pajamas and already in bed. Mama came over and kissed Grandfather on the cheek. Well, what's that for? He asked. For being unselfish and giving your grandson a day he'll remember for the rest of his life. I know it was difficult for you to see the ship today, said Mama. Grandfather nodded, smiled, and hugged Mama back. She kissed Grandma Liz. Grandma took Mama's hand and just squeezed it and winked. Mama winked back. Grandfather asked, Is John asleep? Mama said, If he's not yet, he should be pretty shortly. He was exhausted. Grandfather laughed and nodded in agreement. I'm pretty tired myself. Well, said Mama, I'll let you get your sleep. Good night. Good night, echoed Grandfather and Grandma. Alright. Thank y'all for listening, and until the next part, happy sailing, guys, and God bless the SS United States.